The rain in this new city had a different sound. It wasn't the soft, familiar patter of a Santiago drizzle, but a hard metallic drumming against the fire escape of her tiny studio apartment. For Anna, each drop was a reminder of her isolation. She stood by the window, her breath fogging the cold glass, her fingers tracing the path of a raindrop as it zigzagged downwards. It felt like a metaphor for her life these past 6 months, a constant, unpredictable slide. She had left Chile with a degree in agricultural engineering, a heart full of ambition, and a promise to her abuela that she would make something of herself. But here, her credentials were questioned, her accent was mocked in job interviews, and her savings were evaporating faster than the rain on the hot summer pavement. The small empanada stand she ran with her cousin Sofia was barely keeping them afloat. Every day was a calculation, a tightrope walk over a chasm of bills and fear. The weight of her decision was a physical ache in her chest, a constant, dull throb of regret and anxiety. She missed the sun, the smell of the sea in Valparaiso, the unconditional embrace of her family. Here, the world was gray, and she felt invisible. Tonight, the fear was a sharp, cold stone in her stomach. The rent was due in 3 days, and they were short. Again. She had just closed the stall, her fingers numb from the cold and the constant handling of dough. The familiar scent of fried pastry and spiced beef, usually a comfort, now smelled like desperation. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, the wool damp and scratchy against her neck. As she walked the 10 blocks to her apartment, the city seemed to amplify her loneliness. Laughter spilled from a warm, brightly lit bar, a couple huddled under an umbrella, their bodies close. She was a ghost passing through their world. And then, she saw him. Huddled in a recessed doorway, trying to shield himself from the relentless downpour, was an older man. He was wrapped in a tattered blanket, his face etched with the same exhaustion she felt in her soul. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. In his, she didn't see a plea, but a quiet, profound resignation. It was a mirror of her own despair. Her hand went to the small paper bag in her tote, the 2 leftover empanadas from the day's batch, her own meager dinner. A war erupted inside her. Logic screamed at her. You need this food. You have nothing to give. Keep walking. But a deeper, more resilient voice, the one that sounded like her abuela, whispered, Mija, when you have little, that is when you give. The universe sees. With a resolve that tightened her throat, Anna stopped. She turned and walked towards the man. He flinched slightly, as if expecting a demand, a curse. Instead, Anna knelt, the cold wetness of the pavement seeping through her jeans. Señor, she said softly, her Chilean accent thick in the English word. She held out the bag. It's not much. It's just an empanada. From my home. The man stared at the bag, then at her face. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, widened in surprise. He had a kind face, weathered by hardship, with a network of fine lines around his eyes. He slowly reached out a trembling, chapped hand and took the bag. Gracias, he whispered, his voice rough. Thank you. Anna simply nodded, a single tear mixing with the rain on her cheek. She didn't know why she was crying. She stood up and walked away, feeling both lighter and more foolish than ever. She had given away her dinner, and for what? A fleeting moment of connection? That night, as she lay in bed listening to the city's hum, she thought of the man. She hoped he was warm. She hoped he was safe. It was a small prayer sent into the indifferent night. The morning after the rain was bright and clear, the city scrubbed clean and sparkling. But the brightness did little to lift the heavy fog of worry in Anna's heart. She and her cousin Sofia were at the empanada stall by 5 a.m., their movements a tired, silent ballet of kneading, filling and folding. The air was filled with the comforting savory scent of onions, hard-boiled eggs, olives, and ground beef sautéed with cumin and paprika, the exact recipe her abuela had taught her as a little girl, standing on a stool in a sun-drenched kitchen a world away. Did you sleep? Sofia asked, her voice gentle. She was the pragmatic one, the anchor that kept Anna from floating away on her tides of anxiety. Anna shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. She could still see the homeless man's eyes, the way his trembling hand had closed around the paper bag. We'll figure it out, Anna. We always do, Sophia said, but her words lacked their usual conviction. The morning rush was slow, each minute ticking by with agonizing slowness. Anna served customers with a forced smile, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. They needed a miracle, or at the very least, a sudden massive craving for Chilean street food from every office worker in a 10-block radius. It was mid-morning, during the lull between breakfast and lunch, when Anna saw him. He was walking purposefully down the sidewalk, his head held higher than it had been the night before. He was clean, his silver hair combed back, and he was wearing a simple but clean button-down shirt and trousers. It was the same man from the doorway, but transformed. In his hands he wasn't holding a cup for spare change, but a small, carefully wrapped rectangular package. Anna's breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was a spike of irrational fear. Had she offended him? Was this some strange form of retaliation? But as he approached the stall, his expression was not one of anger, but of profound, almost solemn gratitude. He stopped in front of the counter, his pale blue eyes finding Anna's. "You," he said, his voice clearer and stronger than it had been in the rain. "I looked for you. I asked around. They said the best empanadas were here, made by a woman from Chile." He held out the package. It was wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with a string. "This is for you." Anna stared, her hands frozen at her sides, covered in a light dusting of flour. Sophia had stopped working and was watching, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Senor, you don't have to." Anna began, but the man shook his head, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "Please," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "You gave me more than food last night. You saw me. Not a problem to be ignored, but a person. You saw me, and you gave me your own dinner. I could see it in your eyes." His words struck a chord so deep within Anna that she felt tears welling up again. How could he have known? Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took the package. It was heavier than it looked. The paper was thick and high quality. "My name is Arthur," the man said. "Open it. Please." Under the watchful eyes of both Arthur and a now deeply curious Sophia, Anna's trembling fingers untied the string and peeled back the brown paper. Inside was a beautiful, old wooden box, its lid inlaid with a delicate, faded marquetry of a sailing ship. It looked ancient and valuable. She glanced up at Arthur, her confusion evident. He nodded for her to open it. She lifted the small brass clasp and opened the lid. The inside was lined with faded velvet. And nestled within it was not a piece of jewelry or a stack of money, but a single yellowed and carefully folded piece of paper. Next to it, however, was a small, modern keycard, the kind used for a hotel room or a high-security office. Anna's heart was pounding. What was this? What did it mean? A heavy silence fell over the empanada stall, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. Anna stared into the wooden box, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The ancient, yellowed paper and the sleek, modern keycard created a jarring contrast. She looked from the box to Arthur's face, searching for an explanation. His expression was a complex tapestry of emotion. There was gratitude, yes, but also a deep, lingering sorrow, and a flicker of something that looked like hope. "I don't understand," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. "What is this?" Arthur took a slow, deep breath, as if steadying himself for a story he had not told in a very long time. "The keycard," he began, his voice low and measured, "is for a storage unit. Unit 217, at Secure Store on Grand Avenue. Everything inside it is yours." Sophia, who had been watching with her arms crossed, now stepped forward, her protective instincts kicking in. "What do you mean it's hers? What's in there? Why are you giving this to a stranger?" Arthur met Sophia's skeptical gaze without flinching. "Because a stranger gave me the last of her food, without asking for anything in return. Because she saw a man, not a ghost." He turned his intense gaze back to Anna. "I was not always this." He gestured vaguely to his own clean but simple clothes, implying the man he had been the night before. "For many years I was lost. I had a family, a life, a business. I built things. Then, I lost it all. Not to the market, but to grief. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. My wife, Eleanor, she passed away. And a part of me died with her. I walked away from everything. The life I had built felt like a monument to a pain I could no longer bear. I have been wandering for a long time. He looked directly into Anna's eyes, and she saw the raw, unvarnished truth of his pain. It was a reflection of her own loneliness, a different kind, but born from the same human need for connection and purpose. Last night, sitting in that doorway, I had made a decision. It was to be my last night. I had given up. Anna's hand flew to her mouth, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. The 2 empanadas hadn't just been food. They had been a lifeline, thrown into a dark sea at the very last second. Your kindness, Anna, Arthur continued, his voice thick with emotion. It was a spark. It reminded me that goodness still exists. It reminded me of my Eleanor. She was an immigrant too. From Italy. She arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. He pointed a trembling finger at the yellowed paper in the box. That is her immigration document. She kept it her whole life, a reminder of where she started. The box was hers. Arthur's story was unfolding like a strange, beautiful dream. He explained that before his descent into grief, he had been a successful property developer. The storage unit contained the last physical remnants of his old life. Items he couldn't bring himself to sell or throw away, but also couldn't bear to live with. There are no monsters in that unit, I promise you, he said, a faint smile returning to his lips. Only possibilities. I have no use for them anymore. My path is different now. I am checking into a program today, to get help. To try and find my way back. But that life, the one in that storage unit, it belongs to the past. And you are building a future. A brave young woman, far from home, trying to make her way. Let it help you, as you helped me. He reached out and gently closed the lid of the wooden box, his hand resting on it for a moment. The code for the keycard is 1016. Our anniversary. With that he gave a final grateful nod, turned and walked away, melting into the flow of pedestrians on the sidewalk, leaving Anna and Sophia standing in stunned, disbelieving silence, the weight of the small wooden box feeling like it contained the entire world. For a long moment, neither Anna nor Sophia could speak. The sounds of the city, the blaring horns, the snippets of conversation, the rumble of a delivery truck, seemed to fade into a dull, distant roar. All that existed was the small, beautifully crafted box sitting on the stainless steel counter of their empanada stall, between the tub of filling and the stack of dough rounds. Anna's fingers, still dusted with flour, traced the intricate sailing ship on the lid. It felt smooth and warm, as if infused with the history it contained. This is insane, Sophia finally breathed, her voice a mixture of awe and deep suspicion. Anna, this can't be real. A storage unit? What could possibly be in there? This feels like a movie, not real life. Anna understood her cousin's caution. It was the same caution that had kept them afloat, that made them count every penny, that questioned every too-good-to-be-true opportunity. But looking into Arthur's eyes, she had seen a truth that transcended logic. She had seen the devastating authenticity of his grief and the fragile newborn hope that her simple act had sparked. I believe him, Sophia, Anna said, her own voice surprisingly steady. I saw his eyes last night. I saw his eyes just now. That was not a lie. That was a man, coming back to life. The rest of the day passed in a blur. They worked on autopilot, serving customers, taking money, making change, but their minds were miles away, in a storage facility on Grand Avenue. The empanadas they sold tasted of hope and fear, a strange new recipe. They argued in hushed, frantic Spanish between customers. It could be nothing. Or worse, it could be a trick. He could have lured us there for who knows what. Sophia insisted, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. And what if it's something, Sophia? What if it's something? Anna countered, her eyes shining with a light Sophia hadn't seen in months. What if it's the miracle we've been praying for? We can't just ignore this. We have to know. Finally, as the afternoon sun began to cast long golden shadows down the city canyons, Sophia relented. The desperation of their financial situation was a more immediate and certain threat than the potential danger of a storage unit. "Fine," she sighed, untying her apron. "But we go together. And we leave if anything seems even a little bit off." Anna nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. They closed the stall an hour early, a bold and risky move given their precarious finances, and caught a bus to Grand Avenue. The secure store facility was a massive, impersonal block of concrete and steel, rows of identical orange garage doors stretching into the distance. It was clean, well-lit, and silent except for the hum of climate control. It felt like a tomb for forgotten things. Finding Unit 217 felt like a pilgrimage. Their footsteps echoed in the cavernous space. Anna's hand was shaking so badly, she could barely swipe the keycard. Sophia stood guard, her phone in her hand, ready to dial for help. The electronic lock beeped, and a green light flashed. Anna took a deep, shuddering breath, glanced at Sophia, and then, with a grunt of effort, pulled up the heavy rolling door. The metal rattled loudly in the silence. As the door ascended, a sliver of the unit's interior was revealed, then a larger portion. A wave of cool, dry, still air washed over them. And then, they saw it. The entire 10 by 10 foot space was not filled with dusty old furniture or boxes of forgotten trinkets. It was pristine, organized, and illuminated by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. And it was filled, from floor to ceiling, with professional-grade, brand-new, still-in-the-box commercial kitchen equipment. Stainless steel mixers, industrial dough presses, high-capacity fryers, a massive commercial refrigerator, stacks of baking sheets, and cases of utensils. It was a restaurant owner's dream. A complete, top-of-the-line kit to start a serious food business. Anna and Sophia stood frozen in the doorway, their mouths agape, unable to process the sheer scale of what they were seeing. The silence inside the storage unit was absolute, broken only by the frantic, thunderous beating of Anna's heart. She took a tentative step inside, her sneakers squeaking on the clean, concrete floor. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the cool, sleek surface of a massive stainless steel planetary mixer, the kind she had only ever seen in glossy culinary magazines. Next to it was a professional-grade empanada press, capable of producing dozens of perfect, crescent-shaped pastries every hour. There were industrial proofing cabinets, a giant commercial stove, and stacks of heavy-duty sheet pans still wrapped in plastic. It was a treasure trove. A king's ransom in culinary hardware. "Dios mío," Sophia whispered from the doorway, her voice filled with a reverence usually reserved for church. She stepped in slowly, as if entering a sacred space, her eyes wide with disbelief. This is more than a few items from his past. This is a warehouse. Anna's gaze swept over the incredible inventory. Tucked neatly on a small shelf by the door was a single, simple cardboard box, the only thing that wasn't brand new or wrapped in plastic. Drawn to it, Anna lifted the lid. Inside were not kitchen supplies, but files. Neat, organized folders. On top was a sealed envelope with her name written on it in an elegant, looping script. Anna. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of high-quality stationery. "Dear Anna," the letter began. Asterisk. If you are reading this, it means I kept my promise to myself, and to the memory of my Eleanor. The equipment you see around you was for a dream we shared. We were going to open a small cafe, a place that felt like home. A place where she could bake her biscotti and I could, well, I was going to handle the business. We never got the chance. After she was gone, I bought all of this, foolishly thinking I could build it for her, as a tribute. But every time I looked at it, the pain was too great. I stored it away, a monument to a broken dream. Asterisk. Anna had to stop reading, her vision blurring with tears. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and continued. Asterisk. Last night, you gave me a gift far greater than you can know. You gave me a reason to look forward. In giving so selflessly from your own need, you showed me that the best way to honor a lost dream is to help a new one flourish. This equipment does not belong in the dark. It belongs in a kitchen, filled with the smells of good food and the sound of hope. It belongs to you. It is paid for. It is yours. Do not let your dream become a dusty memory in a storage unit. Build it. Make it glorious. With my deepest gratitude, Arthur. Anna lowered the letter, her entire body trembling. She looked at Sophia, who had tears streaming down her own face. For a full minute they just stood there in the middle of this unbelievable fortune, holding each other and crying. Tears of shock, of relief, of a hope so fierce and sudden it was almost painful. This wasn't just a random assortment of items. This was a specific, curated collection for a food business. Arthur hadn't just given them stuff. He had given them a foundation. He had given them the very tools they needed to escape the relentless struggle of the street stall, to build something lasting, something that could truly honor their family's recipes and their own hard work. The weight of the rent, the fear of the next slow day, the anxiety that had been Anna's constant companion for 6 months. It didn't vanish, but it transformed. It was no longer a crushing weight, but a challenge they now had the power to overcome. They spent the next hour in a daze, opening boxes, reading manuals, their voices rising in excited, overlapping Spanish. Look at this fryer. We could triple our output. And this mixer, Anna. We could finally experiment with those dessert empanada ideas. The unit was no longer a tomb for a broken dream. It was a womb for a new one. They weren't just looking at stainless steel. They were looking at their future. They were looking at La Abuela's Hearth, the proper restaurant they had whispered about in the dark, now suddenly, miraculously, within reach. The keycard in Anna's pocket no longer felt like a strange object. It felt like a scepter. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The euphoria of discovering the storage unit's contents lasted through the night and into the next morning, a bright, buzzing energy that filled Anna's small apartment. She and Sophia sat at her rickety kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of equipment manuals and sketches of a potential restaurant layout, their voices animated, their dreams taking flight on the wings of Arthur's incredible gift. But as the sun rose higher, a new, more complicated emotion began to creep into Anna's heart, a profound and overwhelming sense of unworthiness. The sheer scale of the gift felt astronomical. It was one thing to accept a thank-you meal, or even a sum of money, but this was a life-changing transfer of assets. Who was she to receive this? A woman who had given away 2 empanadas. It felt disproportionate, almost absurd. Sophia, Anna said, her voice quiet, cutting through her cousin's excited chatter about a 6-burner stove. This is too much. This is insane. We can't accept this. Sophia stopped, her smile fading. What are you talking about? Of course we can. He gave it to you. He wanted you to have it. But why? Anna insisted, her frustration mounting. Because I gave him some leftover food? This is worth tens of thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands? I don't even know. It doesn't make sense. There must be a catch. Or we should find him. We should give it back. Sophia leaned forward, her expression turning serious. Anna, listen to me. You didn't just give him leftover food. You gave him hope when he had none. You saw him as a human being when the rest of the world saw a ghost. You think that's a small thing? You think that's a transaction you can put a price on? You saved his life. He said it himself. But this. Anna gestured wildly, as if the storage unit were right there in the room. This is his past. This was his dream with his wife. It feels sacred. It feels wrong to take it. He isn't giving it away like you'd throw out an old chair, Anna, Sophia said, her voice softening. He's entrusting it to you. He's passing on a dream because he believes you can make it come true. Refusing it, that would be disrespectful to his gift. It would be like saying his judgment is wrong, that his wife's memory isn't worth building upon. Her words landed with the weight of truth. Anna fell silent, staring at her own rough, work-worn hands. These hands that kneaded dough, that scrubbed pans, that counted out meager tips. Could they truly be the hands to wield such magnificent tools? Could her small, immigrant dream be worthy of such a grand legacy? The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now intertwined with a sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about her and Sophia. It was about Arthur and Eleanor, and the unbroken chain of kindness that had somehow linked their lives. To refuse was to break that chain. Later that day, they visited the storage facility again, not to inventory, but to simply be present in the space. Anna walked slowly through the aisles of gleaming equipment, her fingers lightly brushing against the cold metal. She tried to imagine Arthur and Eleanor, a happy couple, planning their cafe, full of the same excitement and fear she and Sophia now felt. She wasn't stealing their dream. She was being asked to be its custodian. She was being invited to weave her own story into the fabric of theirs. Standing there, in the quiet hum of the climate control, Anna made a decision. She would accept the gift. Not with a sense of debt, but with a sense of sacred duty. She would build La Abuela's hearth, not just for herself and her family in Chile, but for Arthur and Eleanor too. Their love story, cut short by tragedy, would find a new expression in the warmth of her kitchen, in the comfort of her food. The weight of the gift was immense, but she decided she would not let it crush her. She would let it fortify her. She would grow shoulders strong enough to carry it. She pulled out her phone and, with a newfound resolve, began searching for commercial retail spaces for rent. The dream was no longer a sketch on a napkin. It had a foundation of stainless steel, and it was time to build the walls. The search for a physical space for La Abuela's hearth was a brutal education in the harsh economics of their new city. The optimism fueled by the storage unit collided head-on with the reality of exorbitant rents, intimidating security deposits, and Byzantine city health codes. For every perfect, sunny corner location they found online, there were a dozen hidden costs and deal-breaking complications. The money they had, the meager profits from the stall, carefully saved, was a drop in the bucket. Arthur's gift had given them the engine, but they still needed the car, and the road to drive it on. The fear began to creep back in, this time wearing the mask of practical impossibility. They found a promising space in a developing neighborhood, a former bakery that already had a hood vent and grease trap, which would save them a fortune in renovations. It was small, a little worn around the edges, but it had character. Large front windows that would let in the morning sun, an exposed brick on one wall that reminded Anna of the old buildings in Valparaiso. It felt right. But the deposit and first month's rent was a sum that made both of them physically ill to contemplate. "We can't," Sophia said, her shoulders slumping as they left the viewing, the excitement draining from her face. "It's perfect, but it's impossible. Even if we sold every piece of equipment Arthur gave us, which we would never do, it would take time we don't have." That night, despair returned with a vengeance. It felt like they had been given the keys to a Ferrari, but couldn't afford the gas. Anna sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by the beautiful, useless equipment manuals, feeling like a fraud. She had allowed herself to dream too big, too fast. She was an immigrant with a street stall, not a restaurateur. Who did she think she was? The grand gesture of Arthur's gift was being slowly suffocated by the mundane, crushing details of business. Just as she was about to give in to the tears, her phone buzzed. It was an email notification. The subject line read, "Following up on 124 Maple Avenue application." Her heart sank. This was the rejection from the landlord. She almost didn't open it, not wanting another blow. But something made her click. The message was brief and to the point. Ms. Flores, thank you for your application for the commercial unit at 124 Maple Avenue. We have completed our review and are pleased to offer you the standard lease agreement. We have also received the full security deposit and first month's rent, per the wire transfer from your benefactor's estate lawyer. Please contact our office to arrange a signing time. Congratulations. Anna read the email once. Then twice. Then a third time, her brain refusing to process the words. Benefactor's estate lawyer. Wire transfer. She scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking so violently she could barely dial Sophia's number. "Sophia," she stammered when her cousin answered. "Check your email. Right now." This was not just the gift of equipment. Arthur, or someone acting on his behalf, had been watching, or he had anticipated this very hurdle. He hadn't just given them the tools, he had paved the way. The deposit and first month's rent, the single biggest, most insurmountable obstacle, had been silently, gracefully removed. He had thought of everything. This was no longer just a gift, it was a partnership. A silent investment in their future. When Sophia arrived at Anna's apartment 20 minutes later, her face was pale with shock. "How? Why?" was all she could say. They pieced it together. The landlord must have done a background check after their application, which would have revealed their floundering finances. Someone, Arthur's lawyer, had intervened. He had ensured his gift would not be stillborn. He had ensured that the dream would have a home. The two women held each other, not crying this time, but standing in a solid, silent awe. The fear wasn't gone, but it was now dwarfed by a towering, unshakable certainty. They were meant to do this. They were being guided, supported by a kindness that reached far beyond a single rainy night. They had a kitchen, and now they had a home for it. The next step was to build, and they would. There was no other option. The universe, it seemed, was demanding it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of controlled chaos, a symphony of noise, dust, and sweat. The small space at 124 Maple Avenue was transformed from a dusty, vacant shell into a bustling hive of activity. The sounds of their labor became the new soundtrack to their lives. The high-pitched whine of a power drill securing brackets for shelves, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a hammer, the gritty scrape of a trowel spreading grout between new tiles Anna and Sophia had laid themselves. The smell of fresh paint, sawdust, and cleaning solvents replaced the familiar scent of fried dough, a temporary but necessary sacrifice. They worked from dawn until deep into the night, their bodies aching, their clothes perpetually stained with paint and dirt. But it was a good ache, a productive fatigue. Every screw tightened, every wall painted a warm, sunny yellow, every piece of equipment unwrapped and installed felt like a prayer of gratitude. The commercial mixer, once a silent monolith in a storage unit, was now the centerpiece of their kitchen, its powerful motor humming with potential. The massive stove stood ready, its 6 burners promising a capacity they had only dreamed of. They were not alone. The story of the Chilean immigrant and the homeless man had, inevitably, begun to spread. It started with the curious neighbors who would peek in, then stay to ask questions. Then, some of their loyal customers from the stall, wondering where they had gone, tracked them down and, upon hearing the story, offered to help. A young graphic designer who loved their empanadas spent a weekend designing a beautiful, warm logo for La Abuela's Hearth, for free, a stylized, welcoming hearth with a Chilean flag subtly woven into the flames. A retired carpenter from down the street helped them build and finish the simple, solid wooden tables and counter for the front of the house. This was no longer just their project, it was becoming a community's project. People were drawn to the story, to the palpable energy of hope and second chances that filled the space. Anna, who had felt so invisible for so long, now found herself at the center of a small, bustling universe of support. She learned to accept this help with the same grace with which she had accepted Arthur's gift, understanding that kindness, once released into the world, creates its own momentum, its own gravitational pull. The final touch was the most emotional. On the freshly painted brick wall, opposite the counter, Anna created a small, simple memorial. She framed Arthur's letter and placed it beside a framed black-and-white photograph she had found online after a painstaking search of local obituaries. A picture of a smiling Arthur, decades younger, with his arm around a beautiful dark-haired woman with sparkling eyes, Eleanor. Beneath the frames, she mounted a small, elegant brass plaque. It read, **, in grateful memory of Arthur and Eleanor, whose love and legacy built these walls. May all who enter find warmth and comfort. **, it was her promise to them. This restaurant would not just be a business, it would be a living monument to human connection. The day they finished, the night before their soft opening, Anna and Sophia stood in the middle of the empty dining room. The tables were set. The kitchen was spotless and ready. The Abuela's Hearth sign, lit from within, glowed warmly through the large front window, casting a golden light onto the dark street outside. They didn't speak. They just stood there, arm in arm, looking at what they had built. From a rainy night and a simple act of kindness, from the depths of 2 different kinds of despair, had emerged this beautiful, tangible thing. It was real. Tomorrow, the world would walk in. But for tonight it was just theirs, a perfect, silent, hopeful dream made manifest in bricks, mortar and stainless steel. The morning of the soft opening, the air inside La Abuela's hearth was thick with a nervous energy so potent you could almost taste it, a metallic tang of fear and excitement that mixed with the rich, savory smells emanating from the kitchen. Anna had been there since 3 a.m., her hands moving on autopilot, following the sacred rhythms of her abuela's recipes, but her mind was racing. She checked and rechecked the supplies, wiped down already spotless counters, and adjusted the position of the cutlery on the tables. Sophia was a bundle of nervous motion at the front, fussing with the placement of menus, straightening the chairs for the 10th time, her eyes constantly darting to the door. The open sign was lit. The world was invited in. But what if no one came? What if the story that had fueled their construction wasn't enough to bring people through the door? What if they had built this beautiful ship, only for it to sink on its maiden voyage? The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. 11:05 a.m. No one. 11:15 a.m. The street outside remained indifferent. Anna felt the old familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She retreated into the kitchen, seeking solace in the dough, her fingers pressing and folding, creating perfect, half-moon seals on the empanadas. And then, at 11:20 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. A clear, sharp, beautiful sound that made both Anna and Sophia jump. A woman in a business suit, clutching her phone, stepped in tentatively. "I saw the sign," she said, looking around the warm, inviting space. "I've been watching you fix this place up. I'll try the classic beef empanada and a coffee to go." It was a simple, mundane transaction. But to Anna and Sophia, it felt like a coronation. Anna rushed to the fryer, her hands suddenly steady, her focus absolute. She cooked that single empanada with more care than she had ever cooked anything in her life. She placed it, golden brown and perfectly puffed, into a specially designed cardboard box with their logo, and handed it to Sophia, who presented it to the customer with a beaming, genuine smile. The woman left. The restaurant was empty again. But everything had changed. They had their first customer. They had made their first sale. Then, another person came in. And another. By noon, the small dining room was half full with a quiet, curious hum of conversation. The customers were a mix: neighbors, a few former stall customers who had heard the news, people drawn in by the warm glow of the place and the enticing smells. The feedback was immediate and effusive. "Oh my God, this is incredible. The pastry is so flaky. What's in this sauce? It's amazing." Anna was a whirlwind in the kitchen, but a happy, focused whirlwind. The professional equipment was a dream to work with. The dough press created uniform, perfect discs. The fryer maintained a constant, ideal temperature. She was producing empanadas with a speed and consistency that the street stall could never have allowed. She watched through the service window as people ate, their faces showing pleasure, comfort, delight. They were not just consuming food. They were experiencing a piece of her heart, her history, her abuela's love. And they were loving it. The fear was gone, burned away in the heat of the stove, replaced by a deep, resonant joy. This was it. This was what she had come to this country to do. Not just to survive, but to share, to connect, to build a small corner of home in this vast, sometimes cold, new city. As the lunch rush began to slow, Anna took a moment to lean against the cool stainless steel of the refrigerator, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. She looked out at the dining room, at the happy, sated people, at Sophia laughing with a table of regulars, and she allowed herself a single, quiet, triumphant thought. We did it. The dream was no longer a dream. It was alive. It was breathing. And it was serving empanadas. The soft opening week was a blur of 16-hour days, aching feet, and a level of exhaustion Anna had never known. But it was a glorious, fulfilling exhaustion. Word of mouth, fueled by the powerful backstory and the undeniable quality of the food, spread like wildfire. By Friday, La Abuela's hearth had a line out the door at lunchtime. The small dining room was constantly filled with the warm buzz of conversation and the clinking of cutlery. The community had fully embraced them. Anna, in the heat of the Saturday lunch rush, was in her element. Her movements were fluid, a dance between fryer, prep station and oven. She was coordinating the cooking of 3 different types of empanadas, a fresh batch of Pibra sauce, and monitoring the industrial brewer for the specially sourced Chilean coffee. She was so focused that she barely registered Sofia calling her name from the front of the house. Anna! Anna, you need to see this. There was an urgency in her cousin's voice that cut through the kitchen's noise. Thinking it was a problem, a complaint, a spilled drink, a health inspector, Anna wiped her hands on her apron and hurried out, her heart already starting to pound with a familiar, old anxiety. But the scene that greeted her was not one of chaos or trouble. The dining room had fallen into a strange, hushed silence. The customers were still there, but they were no longer eating or talking. They were all looking towards the door. And there, standing just inside the entrance, was Arthur. But it was an Arthur she barely recognized. The man who stood before her was standing tall, his shoulders square. He was dressed in neat, clean trousers and a simple, warm-looking sweater. His silver hair was trimmed, his face was clean-shaven, and while the lines of a hard life were still there, they seemed less like scars and more like a map of experience. The most profound change was in his eyes. The hollow, watery resignation was gone, replaced by a clear, calm, and peaceful light. He held a single, small bunch of sunflowers in his hand. He saw Anna, and a gentle, warm smile spread across his face. The entire restaurant watched, holding its collective breath. Anna felt the world slow down. The sounds of the kitchen faded away. She walked slowly towards him, her own apron stained with flour and oil, her hair escaping from its bun. She stopped a few feet from him, unable to speak, her eyes filling with tears. Arthur was the first to break the silence, his voice strong and clear, carrying in the quiet room. "I told my counselor I had to see it for myself," he said, his gaze sweeping over the beautiful, bustling restaurant, taking in the warm yellow walls, the happy customers, the framed letter and photo on the brick wall. His eyes lingered there for a long moment, and Anna saw a glimmer of wetness in them too. He looked back at Anna, his expression one of overwhelming pride. "I had to see the dream alive." He held out the sunflowers. Eleanor loved sunflowers. She said they always turned their faces to the light, no matter how dark the days had been. Anna reached out and took the flowers, her hands trembling. "Arthur," she finally managed to whisper, her voice choked with emotion. You gave us everything." He shook his head slowly, his smile deepening. "No, my dear. You gave me everything. I just returned the favor." He took a step forward and did something that broke the last of Anna's composure. He opened his arms. Without a second's hesitation, Anna stepped into his embrace. It was not the desperate clutch of 2 people in a rainy doorway, but a strong, solid, healing hug between a father and the daughter he never had. The entire restaurant erupted into spontaneous, warm applause, customers wiping their own eyes, touched by the tangible, beautiful conclusion to the story they had all heard whispers of. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the hearth they had built together, Anna knew. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. For all of them. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening, La Abuela's hearth was more than a restaurant, it was a neighborhood institution. The story of its founding had become local legend, a modern-day fable of kindness and redemption that was recounted by regulars to first-time visitors. The place hummed with a constant, comfortable energy. The walls, now adorned with pictures sent by Anna's family in Chile, and a few new photos of Arthur, beaming with Anna and Sofia during the opening week, seemed to radiate the very warmth promised by its name. Arthur was a regular presence, not as a owner or a patron, but as family. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday for an early dinner, always sitting at the same small table near the window, the one with the best view of the kitchen door. He had become a quiet, steady part of their lives. He was in a stable living situation, attending his programs, and rebuilding his life, one day at a time. His recovery was a journey, with its own ups and downs, but he was no longer walking it alone. He had a hearth to come home to. On this particular evening, Anna was not in the kitchen. Sofia had insisted she take a night off, to actually sit and enjoy the restaurant she had built. Anna was sitting with Arthur at his table, sharing a plate of postre de mil hojas and 2 cups of rich, Chilean coffee. They were talking easily, laughing about a clumsy new waiter, discussing a new recipe Anna wanted to try, a fusion empanada incorporating a local autumn squash. It was a simple, ordinary moment, but to Anna it was extraordinary. This was the life she had dreamed of but never truly believed she could have. A successful business, a place in a community, a family that was both given and chosen. She looked around the room. A group of students were studying in the corner, fueled by coffee and cheese empanadas. A young couple on a first date were sharing a pastry, their laughter easy and bright. An elderly man, a regular who came in every day for the lentil stew, was reading his newspaper by the window. This was more than a restaurant, it was a sanctuary. A place of warmth and connection, built on a foundation of a single, selfless act. Arthur followed her gaze, a knowing look in his calm eyes. "You did this, Anna," he said softly, stirring his coffee. "You built all of this." Anna shook her head, reaching across the table to place her hand over his. "We built this, Arthur. You, me, Sophia, Eleanor, my abuela, everyone who believed." She thought of the long, difficult journey from Chile, the cold nights of fear, the feeling of being an invisible speck in a massive, uncaring city. That person felt like a stranger to her now. The act of giving away her dinner had been a tiny, desperate rebellion against the darkness, both in the world and in her own heart. She could never have imagined the light it would eventually summon. It wasn't about the money or the equipment. It was about the restoration of faith, Arthur's faith in humanity, and her own faith in herself and her destiny. The door to the restaurant opened, letting in a cool breeze and a new group of customers. They were greeted by the hostess with the same warmth that Anna had once offered a stranger in the rain. The cycle was complete, and yet it was also just beginning, perpetuating itself with every meal served, with every smile exchanged. Anna sat back in her chair, the sounds of her thriving dream a beautiful symphony in her ears. She was home, and her hearth was burning brightly, a beacon against the gathering dusk, promising warmth and shelter to all who sought it.